now let us study something about compensating transaction. Right. So when a transaction execution completes successfully, it is settled in a committed state. Right. So a committed transaction that has performed update transforms the database into a new consistent state, which must persist even if there is a system failure. Right. So once you say that your database is in a committed state, right? So it must be able to persist. The data in a committed database should be able to persist even if there is a system failure, right? So what about this compensating transaction? So the thing is that once a transaction is being committed, you will not be able to undo the effects of the transaction, right? So the only way to undo the effects of a committed transaction is that we need to go for this compensating transaction, right? So for example, if a transaction added $20 to your account, right? So you are going to transfer something from one account to another, right? By unknowingly or something, you have done a transaction of transferring $20 from one account to another. Is it possible to roll back the transaction once it is committed? It's not possible to roll back the transaction once it is committed, right? So the only way to right, undo the effects of a committed transaction is that we have this compensating transaction, right? So if you add $20 to an account, right, if a transaction adds $20 to an account, the compensating transaction would subtract $20 from the account. Right. So I think this we would have encountered in ATMs, right? So there may not be money in your there may not be money in the ATM, right? So you perform some debit operation in an ATM, right? So you like money may be debited from your account, but like money may not be transferred to the end user. So what happens is that later they execute a compensating transaction such that you will be able to undo the effect of a committed transaction. Right? I think this compensating transaction, I think. I think we also have something more about the states of a transaction. Right. So a transaction may not always complete its execution successfully. Right. So if a transaction does not complete its execution successfully due to some failure, it has to be aborted. Right. So if you are to ensure the atomicity property, an aborted transaction must have no effect on the state of the database. Right. So whenever you are going to abort a transaction, you are going to roll back the value of the variables in a database to its previous state. Right. So any changes that the aborted transaction made to the database should be undone. So once the changes caused by the aborted transaction have been undone, we say that the transaction have been rolled back. Right. So whenever a database system identifies that a transaction can no longer proceed due to some failure, it has to be aborted. The transaction has to be aborted. So aborting a transaction means you are going to restore the values of the database to its old values prior to the start of this transaction, right? So once all the changes caused by the aborted transactions are undone, we say that the transaction is being rolled back. Right. So what happens when a transaction fails? Right. So a transaction enters the failed state after the system determines that the transaction can no longer proceed with the normal execution because of hardware or logical errors, right? So such a transaction must be rolled back. So, right. So at this point, the system has only two options, right? So whenever a transaction fails, it is possible to restart that transaction, right? So, however, we restart a transaction only if the transaction was aborted due to some hardware or software error that was not created due to the internal logic of the transaction, right? So you will be able to restart the transaction only if the transaction fails due to some hardware or software error that is not due to the that was not created through the internal logic of the transaction. However, the transaction fails due to some hardware or software failures, you should have killed that transaction, right? So the system can kill the transaction. It is usually done because of the transaction has some internal logic error that can be corrected only by rewriting the applications, right? So then we have to kill the transactions, right? So that's it about the state of the transactions, right? So you have active, fully committed, sorry, active, partially committed, abort, right? And you have rollback, right? So these are the different states of a transaction. So we also studied about sorry, failed and aborted, right? So these are the different states of a transactions. Again, we studied something about compensating transaction. So what do you mean by compensating transaction is that once a transaction is committed, the changes that has been carried out by the particular transaction cannot be undone. So the only way to undo the effect of the changes that has been made by a transaction is to run a compensating transaction. For example, by there was an error or while transferring funds from one account to another, right? So the fund has not received the end user has not received the fund like an ATM transfer, but the fund transfer has been entered in the log file. So the only way to undo it is that to run a compensating transaction, right? So if a transaction has added some $20 to an account by means of compensating transaction, we would run another transaction to subtract -20 from that account.